Last week we did a video about voiced and voiceless plosives and VOT, where the focus was on the plosives and the way they relate to the VOT in a way, which is abbreviation for voice onset time, the onset, the beginning of the time of the voicing. And it refers to the point during the articulation of a sound at which the vocal folds start vibrating in reference to the time of the release of the closure. You know, closure in the case of plosives is when two articulators touch each other, basically close the space between them, but then you have the release, which is the release of the closure. So you see in this picture, it's like a simplified way of showing voice onset time. Do you see the part up here? Here in this part, this bar, this is where closure happens. And then there's this part on the right where voicing begins. Voicing objectively means the vibration of the vocal folds. You see, in between these two, there is a gap here. This gap is called the VOT, voice onset time. You have a list down here, like for a fully voiced sound segment, the voicing occurs all throughout the duration of the articulation. But for example, for a partially voiced ba, da, or ga, there is a small amount of delay in the beginning of the voicing. And you see the gap grows when you have voiceless, unaspirated, there's a bigger gap. You have voiceless, aspirated, there is still a bigger gap. And when you have voiceless, pre-aspirated, the gap is the biggest. This just gives you an idea about voice onset time. Basically, the VOT is the lag or the gap, and the gap for the same sound segment differs from language to language. For example, in English, this might be the case. There might be languages in which the voice onset time is longer for the same sound. That's why you would hear the same sound segment being pronounced differently by speakers of different languages. Voice onset time is something that determines how that sound may be pronounced. So here in the IPA chart, we looked at the tables and said, oh, this is pa, this is ba, this is ta, da. So their difference is they are same place and manner of articulation, but they differ in voicing. But now we're going to go deeper into this. How do we understand the difference between pa and ba, for example? So when one produces a plosive, it is possible not to vibrate the vocal folds. For example, in the case of pa, right? Because it's voiceless. You don't vibrate the vocal folds. It is also possible to follow it with a vowel. You can say pa, or pen, or pad. What happens in this case is that in English we say the plosive is aspirated. So for example, the word pad, if I say, how do you pronounce the word pad? This is how you would transcribe it, because you would say that the pa in English is aspirated. And then if I ask you to transcribe the sound pa in the French language in a similar position, which means syllable initial pre-vocalic. An example would be the word pain. The difference between these two pas in French and English is that in English, in this position, in this environment, the pa will be aspirated, pad. In Spanish, you would pronounce pan. Pa, similar to French with no aspiration, although it's in a similar position to the English pa. Okay, so if you're a speaker of Spanish or French and you cross languages into English, the understanding is that when one produces a plosive while not vibrating the vocal folds, which is a pa here because it's voiceless, then it's followed by a vowel. We say that the plosive in English is aspirated, like pad. We already know that we use a superscripted H in the IPA to indicate aspiration. But you can see that as delay in VOT. So aspiration, although it comes across as a puff of air, it is, in terms of vibration of the vocal folds, it's a lag between the release of the first sound and the beginning of voicing, which in English happens after voiceless plosives at the beginning of stressed syllables. I'm going to put a picture here. Do you see the dashed line, the dotted line? It represents the release. In the first one, you have voicing beginning before the release. In the second one, you have like almost no VOT, but like it's very slight. But in the third one and fourth one, you have more VOT, with the fourth one having the most. You need to know that the VOT, the voice onset time, is measured in milliseconds from the spike indicating the vibrations in the vocal folds in the vowel. It is possible for the VOT to be negative, which means that it's a certain amount of time in milliseconds that the voicing begins before the release. In the Sindhi language, there are words daru, which means door, and taru, which means bottom, and tharu, if I'm right, which is the name of this district. These are the three words, daru, taru, and tharu, in which you have increasing degrees of VOT. The dashed line indicates the moment of release of the plosive closure. A time scale centered on that moment is at the bottom of the figure. You see, at the bottom you have 0 representing the time of release, minus 100 milliseconds, it means 100 milliseconds before release. And then you have the measurement all the way up to 200 milliseconds. So what is going on here is that in the waveform for da at the top of the figure, there's voicing during the closure, throughout the closure, the release, and the vowel. You see, you have da and then ah, this is the ah, but the voicing extends through the closure, across the release, through the voicing, the vowel. So in which case, the VOT is actually less than minus 100. In all of the cases, the VOT is less than 200. In one case, it's negative. You see, when you looked at the waveforms, you didn't care what language it is. All you cared about was the phonetics, because these are sounds. No matter what language, the VOT can help you understand the sound system of that language. So I told you that the same sound across different languages may be pronounced slightly differently because of the different VOTs. Now you would see that different languages make use of different points along the VOT continuum and forming oppositions among plosive consonants. So in French, you don't have aspirated p. In Thai, you have aspirated, unaspirated. In Gaelic, you do not have aspirated p. The distinction in bilabials, if you look at the bilabial pa, ba, in French you have the ba, pa distinction with no aspiration. So there's a two-way distinction. In Thai, there's a three-way distinction. You have ba, ba, and pa. In Gaelic, there's only ba and pa, no aspiration. In English, there is ba and pa. That distinction is there. In Navajo, there's ga and ka. You see, there's no pa, but ka is aspirated. So what is important here is that now, apart from the distinctions that each language makes here, if you look at the numbers at the voice onset time in milliseconds, you would see that the French ba has a voice onset time of almost minus 125. Gaelic ba and the English ba are almost the same VOT. And do you see how different the French ba is from the English ba based on VOT? Another observation is, if you look at the rightmost extreme of the table, what do you see? So it means that the Navajo ka has even more aspiration than the English pa. The VOT is almost 150. The VOT for English pa is less than 100. So the possibilities that occur in different languages are shown with reference to a scale going from most aspirated. At the left, the Navajo aspirated plosives shown in the first row have a very large VOT that is quite exceptional. The unaspirated English pa has not been listed, but in English, when a pa comes from words like spit or span or spar, in these cases the pa is less aspirated, almost like ba. Now, if you look at the Hindi language, the way they pronounce the da, the dentally they pronounce the ha. So in Hindi, they have aspiration on top of da, which is a voiced plosive. You see in this table, all of the aspirations are occurring on top of voiceless plosives. But in Hindi, it is possible to aspirate a voiced plosive, which in all of the plosives are pronounced dentally. The. So these are the dental plosives in Hindi. There's voicing during the plosive, so the da, and both of them are voiced. You can have voicing throughout the closure. But if you look at the plosives in the second and third line, number 2 and 3, you see that there is no voicing throughout the closure. Da has an aspirated version, which is number 3. Can you tell me the difference between number 2 and 3? So number 2 is around 20 and number 3 is almost 100. In the fourth line, again, we have voicing throughout the closure. We can put a number on it. It's almost minus 90. Do you see the symbol that is used for aspiration of the voiced plosive number 4, which is a superscript H, is different from the one used for a voiceless plosive. So if you look at the table, there's these two different kinds of H. One of them is voiceless, the other one is voiced ha. And this is voiced ha because it follows a voiced plosive. In the fourth line, this one has voicing during the closure, followed by a waveform that has some of the appearance of voicing, a wavy line, but also has noise superimposed on it. This is called breathy voicing. So this is pronounced, as far as I know, it's pronounced something like ta. So it's kind of difficult to pronounce it. So the way you do breathy voicing is the vocals are drawn into loose vibrations and do not come fully together. So they're less tightened during breathy voicing.